Whenever you eat and food goes into your stomach mulches it all up and it passes it into the small intestine. The small intestine then breaks down the food in the first process and absorbs it through the intestinal wall and into the bloodstream. That's the only part of the food that actually can be absorbed as calories by the body. Whatever goes into the bloodstream through the small intestine is what actually makes it into the bloodstream. And if you eat a whole head of broccoli, 90% of that whole head of broccoli is actually fiber. And fiber cannot be absorbed in the small intestine as calories. So what happens to it? Well, it's passed through into the large colon for fermentation. So that is why they say if you want to have a better digestive system, you should eat more fiber, because fiber basically is roughage, which basically just becomes poop. All green cruciferous vegetables, basically cruciferous vegetables are those which are grown above the ground, so they're not root vegetables. So it can be broccoli, kale, collard greens, pak choi, asparagus, green beans, spinach, broccoli, cauliflower as well, any type of cauliflower. All of those and loads more are actually green cruciferous vegetables, the bulk of which is fiber, and fiber cannot be absorbed as calories. So whenever you're on a shred, you can literally eat as much as you want of green vegetables and it's not absorbed as calories. The calories in green cruciferous vegetables are actually very slow to raise the blood sugar, so they don't spike an insulin response. After you eat, what happens is the food's absorbed through the intestinal wall into the bloodstream. As soon as that food hits your stomach, immediately it triggers to your pancreas to start secreting insulin. Insulin is a storage hormone. So as soon as you start to eat, the food goes into your stomach and your pancreas starts secreting insulin. So insulin basically floods around your blood, picking up the calories, picking up the food, the sugars that have been absorbed through the intestinal wall and the small intestine, and storing those sugars in the muscles and in the organs. And anything that's left over, it basically sends it to the liver converts it to triglycerides and then puts it into fat store. So because you're eating a whole head of broccoli and only 10% of the broccoli is actually absorbed as calories, and those calories are not high glycemic index calories, your body can utilize and store all those calories very efficiently, and they're not stored as fat. So basically that's why you can eat as many green cruciferous vegetables as you want whenever you're on a shred and not put on any body fat. Are there any side effects to eating loads of broccoli? Well, yes, because obviously whenever food is passed through into the large colon, the only way the large colon can break down food in the large colon is through fermentation. And unfortunately with fermentation comes gas. So that's why people hear of the saying, beans make you fart. It's true, beans do make you fart because the majority of the bean is actually fiber, and fiber cannot be broken down in the small intestine. It must be passed through to the large colon for fermentation. And when it's passed through there for fermentation, it creates gas. In the beginning, it can be really uncomfortable, and there are foods that create more gas than others. And so you just have to experiment and figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and then limit the things that obviously are very, very high gas producing for you as an individual. But what happens over time is your microbiome completely changes, because we have this incredible amount of bacteria inside our gut, and your microbiome basically develops, or the bacteria multiply and grow based on the foods that you regularly feed them. So if you regularly feed your body white carbs, white starchy carbs such as bread, rice, pasta, if you give it loads of sugar, if you give it loads of acidic foods, then the bacteria that your gut develops will actually be bacteria that feed on those foods. And so whenever you start eating better foods, you start eating more whole foods, you start eating more cruciferous vegetables, you start eating better foods, your body has to develop a whole new microbiome. So basically you don't even have the adequate amount of bacteria in your gut in order to break those down. So the ones that can break those down actually have to work harder, which is why it produces more gas in the beginning. But as your microbiome changes, if you consistently eat more fiber, more green cruciferous vegetables, more beans, more lentils, foods that are really high in fiber but relatively low in calories and definitely low on the glycemic index, whenever you eat that way, your gut bacteria multiply and multiply and multiply and get more and more and more over time, which means they can handle that type of food, which means you just don't get as much gas.